Hi, my name is Stephen Sindoni. Today is Saturday, May 19th, 2012. My guest is Ramon Almonte. Ramon is a native New Yorker of Dominican parentage who was raised on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. At an early age, Ramon fell in love with ufology, science fiction, and spirituality, which was very instrumental in molding who he is as a person, developing his character. Ramon is presently the co-host of the 100th Monkey radio show that used to be heard weekly on BBS radio on the internet, but now it can be heard on YouTube. Ramon is also the author of a book entitled Scratching the Cosmic Conscience. Ramon is presently residing in Japan. Ramon, I'd like to welcome you to Stephen's World Talk Radio.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you bringing me on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. You're a very interesting fellow, and I think it's important that the public get to find out who Ramon Almonte is today.
Well, let's see. It all started, I was born in like 1976 in New York, as everybody knows. But I think my earliest memory was I had an out-of-body experience when I was either 2 or 3 because I was still in the crib. And as I'm looking at my baby bottle, I'm trying to grab it, my hand's going through it. And my hand keeps going through the baby bottle, and I was getting frustrated, and that's all I really remember. But after that, to move a little fast forward, my parents, especially on my mother's side, they were very into Santeria. So that was like my beginning spirituality on one side. And then on the other side, my father was a Baptist. So don't ask me how those two ended up together, because my mother was practicing. And Santeria, for those of you who don't know, is the combination of the African religion Yoruba, which is from the west coast of Africa, and Catholicism. So most slaves in the Caribbean and in most places couldn't practice their religion, so they had to cover it up. And they took their deities and covered it with the saints from the Catholic religion. So as that went on, my parents, like a lot of American kids, go through divorce, and I went through my really angry stage. But there was a teacher I had, and her name was Miss Mintz. And this is 4th grade, so it's like 1980s, 86, 87. And anyway, she was the first person to teach me on meditation. And her meditation was very simple. It's like she took you into this, you were on a beach, you imagine you're on a beach, you floated up into the clouds, and then when you were in the clouds, you brought in what she called the blue pearl, which was amazing that a teacher in that time period was actually doing this. And of course, the principal and the other teachers didn't know about this. She did this kind of quiet and hush hush. So I think she was very instrumental in help opening me up. But I practiced for a while, like maybe 6 months. But being a 9 or 10-year-old boy, you kind of like fall back in. But at that time, I really, there was a guy who introduced me to the famous plant marijuana. So I kind of like closed up for many years and moved on. And then to fast forward, my parents got divorced, and I was going to, like I was saying, I was going through the angry stage. And when I got around 17, as my partner in my radio show always says, the proverbial 2x4 hit me in the face, and I won't go into details, but I got in trouble with the law. And it's the first time when you're facing you might do time, because at that time I wanted to be a tough guy, and we were like, the kids I was hanging out with at the time, we were like forming a wannabe gang, and at this point, I saw myself like, I might be locked up for a couple of years, and I might become someone's girlfriend, and that really scared the crap out of me.
So you
you
grew
know.
up you grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Is that not correct?
Yeah, which is not too far from Columbia University. But at that time, the Columbia students did not cross, past a certain point because it wasn't like dangerous and shoot 'em up kind of thing, but it wasn't. It was a sketchy neighborhood, and if you go now, it's just overpriced and all these really nice restaurants. But back then, it was like predominantly the black neighborhood, and it, I don't know. It was just like the crack infestation was just all over the place.
So you would say it
So
was territorial then, the neighborhoods in that time.
very territorial. Very, especially when it came to the whole thing with the drug spots and stuff like that. And a lot of it, for us growing up, our heroes were the drug dealers, and that's horrible that that's who your heroes are these drug dealers who, and some of the big heroes that even to this day they've been dead like for 20 years and people still talk about them like they did something great. But really, what did they contribute to society? But not to go off topic too much, but so I got back into meditation, and that really woke me up. I gotta change. That's the first hint in my life that was like, I have to make a change. I have to become someone different. This person I am now is just gonna lead me down a bad path, and I don't like it. So I started reading a lot of books, and this brings me to a very funny story. In 1994, we were like at that time, I was in this park called Morningside Park in Harlem, and we were like drinking and smoking pot, and this guy brings out this book, and the book is David Icke's book. And I think it was the first book he wrote. And he's like so into it. He's telling us about it. I'm like, oh, that's all BS, man. And then the irony about it is that now, like, I'm a huge fan of David Icke, and I have the utmost respect for him. And to look at him back then as like, oh, that's all BS, really not knowing what I was talking about, having no prior knowledge to any of it. But to move forward, I've had like a lot of, in my family, there's been a lot of, especially on my father's side, there's been a lot of weird things. Like, for example, my grandmother when my father was really young, there was this, what she called a really tall man in the room. She wakes up and there's this really tall man, and I'm not really sure the story what he looked like, but he was this really tall man in the room, and she asked him like, "What are you doing here?" And he didn't like want to answer, so she got kind of scared and grabbed some scissors. And according to her, she threw the scissors at the guy, and it hit his arm and it hit the wall, and the guy turned into a cat and then ran away. And then with my, so I'm just giving you a brief history of what I know of my family. And with my father, he's always like seen entities, and one of the entities he's seen is like graves and stuff like that. So within my family, this is kind of a common occurrence kind of thing. So I always wonder like what's really happening there. But to regress back a little bit to finish that up, when I was, how old was I? I think I was either 18 or 19. I went to a psychic, and because of the prior trouble I have gotten into, I was a little worried of retribution, and so I went to a psychic, and the psychic was telling me like, you're being watched, and then I was like, by who? And she was like very resistant to tell me, but then she finally said, you have aliens that watch you. And I was like, what? And again, it was just that, right away I kind of closed up, and I was just like, this woman's crazy. I thought in my mind, what a waste of money. But, finding out about my father and my grandmother is more like, well, she might be right. I've had since then I've had some weird stuff happen, so that only on shows like this I can talk about. Talk about this stuff in my neighborhood. It just blew me out.
Well, that's why I'm giving you the opportunity to have the forum here, because these are things that you can't talk on the street corner.
Yeah, and it kills me because we can talk about, the latest sneakers and, what superstar got drunk last night, but, we can't talk about what reality really is and what our conscious is really, what are we really here for? Because I know damn well we're not here to pay taxes and then die, as some people say.
I'll tell you what we're here for. We're here to talk about your book. I like to talk about Scratching the Cosmic Conscience. By the way, I found it thoroughly enjoying. I'd like you to tell the listeners what inspired you to write this book, Ramon.
Well, let's go back to 2002. I had just finished reading The Alchemist, and between The Alchemist and a friend of mine who is psychic, I always wanted to come to Japan, but I was always waiting for something to happen to bring me here. Something else had to bring me here, and I read The Alchemist, and I saw the way, for those of you who never read this book, you need to read it. When I told my friend about, I always want to go to Japan, she kind of went into this, like, real weird vibe that she gets into, and her face kind of goes blank, and then I guess she was channeling, is the best way I can describe it, and she said, if you don't go soon to Japan, you'll never go. And the reason why I'm bringing this up of the inspiration, when I came to Japan, I brought the ticket. I had $800 in my pocket, and I found a girl I had met. Was like, okay, I'll rent you the room for it was like $400 when you do the exchange rate, $400 a month. So I gave her the money. So now I'm flat broke, and another person I knew got me a job at washing dishes. So when I was there, it was Christmas, and they don't really celebrate Christmas here. So I'm by myself, and I'm walking, and I pass a canal, and I was so depressed because it was the first Christmas without my family. And then that's when I was looking at the water, and something about the water just hit me, and that feeling of depression was gone. It was my first feeling of being at one. So after I felt like I need to write a book. And then came 2007. That whole time I had that yearning to write a book, but I wasn't sure I would like start a page on, one book and then not do it, and then start a couple pages for another book and not do it. And 2007, I said, I need to sit down and write this book. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to write about my personal experience, but also adding into it the experience I would love to have and where I would love to be. So this book is basically about the spiritual journey of a person and where we can be at. I think my earliest memory was I had an out-of-body experience when it was either 2 or 3 because I was still in the crib. And as I'm looking at my baby bottle, I'm trying to grab it, my hand's going through it. My hand keeps going through the baby bottle, and I was getting frustrated, and that's all I really remember. But after that, to move a little fast forward, my parents, especially on my mother's side, they were very into
Hi, my name is Stephen Sindoni. Today is Saturday, May 19th, 2012. My guest is Ramon Almonte. Ramon is a native New Yorker of Dominican parentage who is at Stevens World Talk Radio.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you bringing me on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure. You're a very interesting fellow, and I think it's important that the public get to find out who Ramon Almonte is today.
Well, let's see. It all started, I was born in like 1976 in New York, as everybody knows. But
was raised on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. At an early age, Ramon fell in love with ufology, science fiction, and spirituality, which was very instrumental in molding who he is as a person, developing his character. Ramon is presently the co-host of the 100th Monkey radio show that used to be heard weekly on BBS radio on the internet, but now it can be heard on YouTube. Ramon is also the author of a book entitled Scratching the Cosmic Conscience. Ramon is presently residing in Japan. Ramon, I'd like to welcome you.
Santeria. So that was like my beginning spirituality on one side. And then on the other side, my father was a Baptist. So don't ask me how those two ended up together, because my mother was practicing. And Santeria, for those of you who don't know, is the combination of the African religion Yoruba, which is from the west coast of Africa, and Catholicism. So most slaves in the Caribbean and in most places couldn't practice their religion, so they had to cover